morning with this dramatic escalation in the Trump administration's efforts to stem the flow of narcotics from Latin America into the United States. The president announced a deadly U.S. strike on a vessel in the Southern Caribbean yesterday that he said was carrying drugs from Venezuela.
The White House released this video that appears to show a speedboat exploding in flames. President Trump claimed the boat was operated by the gang Tren de Aragua.
We just, over the last few minutes, literally shot out a boat, a drug-carrying boat, a lot of drugs in that boat. We have a lot of drugs pouring into our country, coming in for a long time. And we just, these came out of Venezuela and coming out very heavily from Venezuela. A lot of things are coming out of Venezuela, so we took it out.
The administration also faced a major legal setback yesterday. A federal appeals court ruled that it can no longer use the 18th century wartime law called the Alien Enemies Act to deport alleged Venezuelan gang members. We're going to break down that ruling with our NBC News legal analyst, Danny Savalos, in just a moment. First, let's go to White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard for more in Washington. Vaughn, good morning. So tell us more about what the president says this strike in the Caribbean accomplished, and how is Venezuela responding?
Right. Good morning, Joe and Savannah. In a social media post after the strike, which included apparent video of a ship going up in flames, we should note there are still scant details out this hour and specifics about the military operation that was underway. But the president in a social media post saying, quote, "Please let this serve as a notice to anybody, even thinking about bringing drugs into the United States of America. Beware." The White House indicating that 11 individuals who they claimed to be members of Tren de Aragua out of Venezuela were killed, that this was a drug-carrying vessel headed to the United States. Again, that's according to the White House. Venezuela has pushed back, President Maduro suggesting that this type of effort is a staging to try to push him out of government. Of course, during the first Trump administration, there was an effort to see Maduro leave office. Just last month, the U.S. sent 3 guided missile destroyers into the Caribbean. This is quite a response to see this sort of action in these international waters by the United States. But the White House wanted to send a message that it will stop any drugs that are intended on their way here to the United States, guys.
Vaughn, also on another note, we mentioned this, the president announced just yesterday that he's relocating the headquarters of the U.S. Space Command. That's this joint military force that defends U.S. interests in space. That is moving from Colorado to Huntsville, Alabama. What is the backstory there?
Right. He held a press conference yesterday to make this announcement. He was flanked by Vice President Vance and Defense Secretary Hegseth, but also the 2 U.S. senators from Alabama, Katie Britt and Tommy Tuberville. And he was suggesting that this move into Huntsville, number one, was a move that would put them near not only one key NASA space mission operation, but also several other private space entities, including Boeing and Lockheed Martin. But the president, we should be clear, when he justified at that press conference yesterday his reasoning for moving the Space Command from Colorado Springs to Huntsville, Alabama, the one key reason that he provided was because Colorado allows mail-in voting. Of course, those are very separate issues, but the president just last week said he wants to ban mail-in voting. And yesterday from the White House at that podium, they're suggesting that that was a key reason why he moved Space Command out of Colorado into Alabama, of course, a deeply Republican state.
Vaughn, before we let you go, I want to ask you about that ruling from the federal appeals court. It bars the Trump administration from continuing to use the Alien Enemies Act to deport alleged gang members. The use of this wartime law, immediately raised questions back in March when we saw the administration deporting hundreds of Venezuelan migrants to El Salvador. The legal battle we know isn't over, but for the Trump administration, how big of a defeat is this right now?
Right. You're absolutely right, Joe. We could expect the Trump administration to try to take this to the Supreme Court here. But in this 2-to-1 decision from the appellate court, there was a George W. Bush and Joe Biden nominee that were in the majority there. The one dissent on the appellate court was a Trump appointee judge. But this is a defeat because, in large part, this was not only a rebuke of their actions earlier this year Of course, folks will recall when hundreds of individuals who the Trump administration alleged to be members of the Tren de Aragua gang were deported from the United States and sent to that El Salvador mega prison. Of course, we quickly found that there were deep, serious questions about the legitimacy of claims about many of those individuals who were said to be members of this gang. But the appellate court making clear in their ruling that they found that there was no invasion or predatory incursion by these gangs that the White House had designated to be terrorist organizations, which was the impetus of invoking this wartime act during this time of peace, and the court making clear that the administration does not have the authority to at least deport individuals under this law.
All right, Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, thank you so much.
Let's bring in Danny Cevallos for more on this federal appeals court ruling. So first, Danny, explain the court's decision to us. What limitations does it kind of put into place when it comes to the deportation of migrants?
Yeah, Vaughn Hilliard did a great job there. But essentially, the court noted that this is something that has come up really only about 3 times in our nation's history. That's how rarely the statute gets examined by courts. But here's the key. Was what the executive order sought to combat, was that a predatory incursion? Was that an invasion within the statute? Because if it is, then the president has the power. If not, then he doesn't. But I caution that this is a very narrow ruling in the sense that there are still other avenues for removal that are available, both statutory and otherwise, and the government can continue to use those. This is a narrow, even though it's 130 pages, this is a narrow decision that not only that this was not an incursion or a predatory incursion or invasion, but also it is narrow in the sense that it allows the president to go forward, and it's temporary in the sense that it's only an injunction. So many of these things we deal with in a Trump term are preliminary injunctions. They're not final decisions on the merits. The case actually goes back down to the district court. But what the court has done now and what they have to do in these cases is kind of do like a calculate the odds, almost like gambling. Like the petitioners have to show, hey, we're likely to win. So court, you need to analyze our likelihood of success on the merits of the case, even though you're not deciding the merits of the case quite yet.
We know around 250 Venezuelan migrants were deported to this mega prison in El Salvador last March. A New York Times investigation later found most of them did not have criminal records here in the U.S. So this ruling now, does it change anything for those who've already been deported under this law?
So here's the key. The answer is maybe not, because the administration's argument is going to be is once they're gone, they've already tried to use this. Once they're gone, they're outside of our control. The courts, the administration, we have no power over people who have actually already been removed. There is no longer a remedy because they're no longer here. We can't jurisdictionally reach out and grab them. So that is probably going to be the administration's position. And the other important thing is that by removing them, time is everything. That highlights the fact that petitioners need to get to court as fast as they can. And we've seen in just the last few months, people have to file their petitions within hours and wake up judges at 2 a.m. So this is a really interesting era, I would say, of filing petitions, because they need to be filed within minutes sometimes to prevent removal, because once removed, it's a bell you might not be able to unring.
I want to ask you about another loss here for the Trump administration, legal loss. This is a federal judge in California ruling that Trump's decision to deploy thousands of these National Guard troops and Marines to L.A. back in June was illegal. We do have a statement here from the White House. They said, once again, a rogue judge is trying to usurp the authority of the commander-in-chief to protect American cities from violence and destruction. Walk us through here what this judge said. How did they say the Trump administration broke the law?
We start with the default. When we talk about cities like D.C., D.C. is an anomaly. D.C. is under federal jurisdiction. D.C. is under the command, so to speak, of the president already. Now, of course, they have a local government, but in essence, D.C. is a federal enclave. On the other hand, the trickier constitutional issue is, can the president federalize National Guard troops and send them into another state over that governor's objection? So there are a lot of different issues here. The default position is that the National Guard is under the command of a state's governor. The president can federalize those troops, but only under certain statutory authority. The challenge is that the Trump administration is very good at finding the nebulous language in the statute And so they've justified mobilizing these troops really to send them in, likely for law enforcement. But another statute, the Posse Comitatus Act, expressly prohibits National Guardsmen, federal troops from directly engaging in law enforcement. But the administration's approach is, well, what if they're protecting a building? What if they're doing something else that isn't directly enforcing the law? Because that is classically a state power to enforce the law and protect its residents.
All right, Danny Ceballos, thank you very much.
Survivors of Jeffrey Epstein and his accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell will make their voices heard this morning on Capitol Hill. They're part of a Stand With Survivors rally. Just yesterday, the House committee investigating Epstein released a trove of files related to the convicted sex offender. Comes as the Trump administration faces mounting pressure to release more information about his case. Now, the content of all the records was not immediately clear, but many of these files have already been made public.
Democrat Ro Khanna and Republican Thomas Massie are leading a bipartisan push in the House for the release of the Epstein files. They will hold a press conference with some of Epstein's victims after that rally this morning. Khanna had this to say on MSNBC last night.
This is not partisan. This is not anti-Trump. This is about standing with survivors. This is about protecting kids. This is about morality.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Melanie Zanona, who joins us with the latest. Mel, good morning. So first, what more can you tell us about this batch of documents the House committee released last night? Anything new or newsworthy here?
Yeah, good morning, guys. It does appear that after an NBC News review of these files, that most of what was released yesterday was already publicly available information. So things like public court filings and transcripts from the trials, investigative files from the Palm Beach Police Department. Now, there were some flight logs. That may have been the only real new piece of information from Epstein's plane. Some of that information was already available, but what they released yesterday appears to be more current than what had already been publicly available. That being said, it doesn't say who was actually on the plane, just lists the number of people, does indicate that there were both males and females on that plane, in addition to Epstein, of course. And overall, of these, some 30,000 pages of documents, it represents only a fraction of what the DOJ overall has in its possession that relates to this case. So the question is whether the DOJ is going to be handing over more files to the House Oversight Committee, which did issue a subpoena for the documents related to this case. The DOJ has insisted this is a first batch. That is what we heard from Speaker Mike Johnson and Oversight Chair James Comer as well. But there's a real question about whether this might be the extent of what the committee actually receives.
Mel, in one of the first House actions since lawmakers returned from their summer recess, Republican Representative Thomas Massie, who we were just discussing there, he filed a discharge petition yesterday to force a vote compelling the Justice Department to release all of the Epstein files. Has Massie said why he's so adamant about this, and how is GOP leadership responding here?
Well, for Massie, his sort of argument is that he doesn't trust the DOJ or the Trump administration to turn over all the information. He believes the only real way to get their hands on this information is his measure, the one you mentioned, that essentially calls for the immediate release of essentially all the files with very minimal redactions. And now, in terms of how the GOP leadership is responding, I'm told they've been mounting an all-out effort to try to stop this so-called discharge petition. They teed up a separate sort of symbolic measure that they're going to vote on this week, just encouraging the House Oversight Committee investigation. And they also decided to release those files publicly yesterday. This is all part of a strategy behind the scenes. And meanwhile, we're also hearing that the White House has been lobbying Republican members, not to back that discharge petition, at least according to Thomas Massie. Take a listen to what he said last night.
They are trying very hard to keep this from getting the requisite number of signatures to force the vote. And I think it's foolhardy. I think we'd be served better politically. Obviously, the victims would be served better in terms of justice, but Republicans would be served better politically by just following through on this promise and releasing the files.
So as of right now, only 4 Republicans, including Massie, have signed on to this discharge petition. They need 218 lawmakers total. And assuming that all Democrats sign on, that means they need 6 Republicans total. So they're close, but they're not quite there yet. And at least 2 Republicans who previously said they might sign on to this discharge petition now saying they're not going to back it because of the public release of those files last night. But it's something that we're certainly watching on Capitol Hill over these next few days.
And Mel, it's going to be an important day for Epstein victims on the Hill today. We're going to hear from some of them more in a moment. But But what can we expect from this Stand With Survivors rally and the press conference that's supposed to follow?
Yeah, I think it could be a really powerful and explosive moment. We're expecting to hear from 10 victims and survivors, some of which have never even spoken out publicly before, according to both Thomas Massey and Rokana, who are helping to organize this press conference. This comes after yesterday some victims also had a private roundtable behind closed doors with a bipartisan group of members. Speaker Johnson was also in attendance. The question, of course, is whether some of these new public insights potentially in these powerful stories are enough to sway some members to sign on to that discharge petition that we talked about. Regardless, though, it's pretty clear that this is going to be an issue that stays in the spotlight on Capitol Hill for quite some time.
No doubt. All right, Mel, thank you.
Well, while we expect to hear more from Epstein's victims later today, as we mentioned, NBC News senior Washington correspondent Hallie Jackson sat down for an exclusive interview with some of the survivors and their families. They shared their stories, with one survivor calling a potential presidential pardon for Maxwell a, quote, slap in the face.
A show of hands here. If you or somebody you love was abused or trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell. All of you.
For the first time publicly, 9 Jeffrey Epstein survivors or their relatives together.
Why did you decide to come here today?
I'm coming here because there's been a severe miscarriage of justice, a delay in accountability.
Each of us, in our own way, over the past several decades, have stood up and told our stories so that someone would listen to us, only to be faced with the frustration of being ignored.
Alone we are afraid, together we are feared.
Jenna Lisa Jones, Lisa Phillips, Jess Michaels, Marika Chartouni, Liz Stein, the siblings of Virginia Roberts Giuffre.
She should be here. I am so honored to be here with you guys. She would be here. She'd be screaming, you know.
And Wendy Avis.
Were you abused by Jeffrey Epstein?
Yes.
She has never before spoken out about the abuse she says she suffered at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein when she was a teenager in Florida.
I just put it behind you, didn't talk about it, didn't think about it, nothing. And it was kind of like, okay, now you have to heal from this. Now you have to address it and face it for the first time ever. Like, this is real.
How many of you want to see more documents released publicly related to the Epstein case?
They tell us no one from the Justice Department has reached out to them.
Nobody in this room has heard at all from the Department of Justice?
No.
And they're furious about the interview between the Deputy Attorney General and convicted Epstein co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell, conducted over 2 straight days in July.
There's no reason why someone like that should be platformed when we are ignored.
She is the abuser, and why are we so concerned with how she feels about things and her opinions?
Now they want more accountability and more investigations from the Justice Department.
Who else would like to see the DOJ reopen this investigation?
Yeah.
Okay. All of you.
Had they done their job in the first place, none of us would have to be sitting here on camera today.
President Trump has downplayed the renewed attention on the Epstein case. And while White House officials have said no leniency is being discussed in Maxwell's case, the president has not publicly ruled out a pardon for her.
Show of hands, who would like to see President Trump definitively rule out a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell? Every single one of you.
Pledging they will not be silent in their push for accountability.
As a community, we have to stand up and we have to say enough is enough. Enough is enough. No more. We have to change the culture, and we have to provide safety and protection and belief when people come forward. It's what Virginia would be doing right now.
Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney tells NBC News that they cannot, quote, respond to every outlandish claim or wouldn't be able to get any actual work done. Adding, and again, quoting here from David Marcus, that only when, quote, plaintiff's lawyers came knocking did they start pointing the finger at his client. We have also reached out to the White House and to the Justice Department, but have not yet heard back. Back to you.
All right, Hallie, thank you.
In weather now, cold front on the move, bringing showers and storms to the Midwest and the Central Plains.
Once again, it's like fall And here we are. Angie Lassman's here to tell us more. Hi, Angie. Good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning to you. I think it's an easy game of find the cold front today. You can see exactly where it is, kind of marching some of those showers farther into parts of the Great Lakes and in the Midwest, and even stretching back into parts of the plains. And that's kind of the general area that we're going to see the unsettled weather through the day today. But already waking up to some rain in places like Green Bay and going back into parts of Iowa. Later today, this line shifts to the east. So this is 8 p.m. So between now and then, we're going to see it work across the Great Lakes. Michigan really starting to see some of that rain, stretching into parts of Illinois, Indiana, and then back towards the plains, we'll see the chance for some stronger storms. So where you see that yellow shading, it's a small area, but it does include Kansas City and Wichita, where we could see that severe risk lasting into our afternoon hours. By the time we get into tomorrow, this system, we're not done with it just yet. It shifts to the east even more, kind of rotates some of this rain into parts of the northeast. We've had a nice stretch of really pleasant, dry weather across this region, but really do need some of this rain to kind of keep the fire threat at bay moving forward through the rest of the season. So we're going to watch for brief periods of some heavy rain and also some gusty winds as that works through. Between now and then, really through Thursday, not an impressive amount of rain by any means, but could interrupt some of those outdoor plans. We've got about a quarter of an inch that we're expecting. Some pockets of higher amounts up to an inch in places like northern Michigan and western New York. Now, as we get through the next couple of days, we're going to slowly but surely start to see things improve when it comes to temperatures out west, but not just yet. Still the Pacific Northwest under these heat alerts. And we've got another day where we could see some records likely. 99 degrees in Spokane later today, more than 20 degrees above normal. The heat wave continues there. But look what the cold front is doing to our friends in the Midwest. We've got just 64 degrees for the high in Minneapolis today. Notice the 50s that are on tap in Duluth tomorrow, upper 60s for Detroit. Even Louisville going to be running cooler than normal for this time of year as we head into the just mid 70s. And then we settle into a cooler kind of pattern for the Midwest. As we round out our work week, it's 60s on tap for Green Bay all the way through the weekend. We've still got those warm summer-like temperatures in places like Philly for Friday and Saturday, but we do see a bit of a drop in temperatures by the time Sunday rolls around, guys, going from the high 80s to the mid 70s.
Looks like a nice weekend.
It does, yeah. And we'll get a little rain. Unfortunately, we need some rain here, so we'll take it.
Yeah. Again, it's September. I'll allow it. Thank you, Angie.
You got it.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.